My name is David Martinez, and today we're going to talk about when reverse culture shock almost made me flunk out of college. I came back from my study abroad experience in Lithuania. I was there during the spring semester, and then I had this incredible 2 months traveling Europe. And then I ended up back in Upland, Indiana, and I had a pretty severe case of reverse culture shock. And I became a little bit depressed. I stopped going to class. I was not very motivated. Nothing could really get me excited.
Yeah.
And I didn't know at the time that it was reverse culture shock. I'm pretty well traveled. I didn't think it wasn't supposed to happen to me. And I ended up actually failing a couple classes and dropping out of college. And so now when I talk to students before they study abroad, I tell them to be careful with culture shock. It's a thing, it's a real thing. And also re-entry into the United States can be pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
you're Billy, you are the director for study abroad at JBU. I'm sure you've had some experience with
Yep.
culture shock, reverse culture shock with students, and you're also well traveled. Do you have any experiences with culture shock?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I grew up in Ireland, Northern Ireland, so people aren't typically nice to each other. So coming to America, I think culture shock for me was how kind people were. And it almost made you feel a bit vulnerable. What do they want? Why are they being so kind to me? So that threw me off. But reverse culture shock, coming back and forth from Ireland to America, hits me more with the driving. In Ireland, people are so kind and very patient with drivers who are, from other countries, even though they may not recognize, they're from America, but they can tell by the way they're driving.
Can they tell because they're on the wrong side of the road? Or
they might be on the wrong side of the road, and that's okay. But we would be very reluctant to honk the horn. Okay. Where in America, honestly, coming back, there's a lot of honking the horn for me getting back, or going down the wrong side of the highway, which has happened multiple times. And here's what's more common: why do you have to park your car in the same direction as the road? And
that's not the case in Ireland?
No, not at all. You can park it
in any direction.
In any direction. So there's a lot of reminding of myself when I come back to America. This is how the things are. Yeah. This is the ways they're supposed to be.
Yeah. So in your capacity, though, as you're preparing students for a study abroad experience, what do you tell them in terms of culture shock and reverse culture shock?
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. I mean, before an American college student goes anywhere, you really want to have several sessions of them, with them, preparing them. Preparation is key. And one of the things I say is brace yourself, because you are going to experience things that you've never experienced before. You're going to see God in a whole new way that you've never seen him before. And you're going to realize that you need him, that all the comforts of home have been removed. All of the familiarities of home are gone, and you're in this unknown, uncertain area, and yet God is still God. He's the God of all people, every tribe, every tongue, every nation. He's still there for you. And I think that's really, really comforting for them to know that no matter where they go, no matter where they are, God is there.
Yeah, that could be a good anchor through the process. Culture shock it can manifest itself in different ways when you set out on this journey. Typically what happens is you arrive and this is the best place ever, things are different. The food is different. The, public transportation, a lot of Americans aren't familiar with public transportation and they love it. Or they walk. I hear this often, I can walk. And so this is the greatest place ever. I can't believe, I never want to leave. That's kind of those are the comments that you get. And then about a month later, it comes crashing down. That's right. And it turns into, this is the worst place ever.
That's right.
The food is terrible. Whatever, things, everything that you loved about the country now becomes annoying. Why can't they have the right food? Why does it take so long? Why do I have to walk everywhere? And then you end up in this kind of middle ground, sort of, you understand the culture and you're kind of proud of that. You're in this moment of, wow, I learned how to navigate these different, the different aspects of the culture. And so I mentioned this to students before they go, but nothing can really prepare you for that experience.
No, it can't.
And I remember when I went to I went to live in Taiwan with my wife, and I had the same experience. I got there, and she was shocked because I kept saying, "We're going to buy an apartment. We're going to buy a car.
Yeah.
We're going to live here for the rest of our lives." And she was like, "Whoa, slow down."
Yeah.
It didn't last very long. We were there for a total of 2 years, but that's the kind of experience, And so I think it's important to remember that, to keep that in mind, and brace yourself. I think it's a great piece of advice, because you're right. You're going to encounter God. You're going to encounter different churches, different ways of doing things.
Yeah.
And to remember and to know these things in advance can be
Absolutely
helpful.
And you can't reverse the trend.
Right.
I mean, you can't take them and have them irritable as soon as they get off the plane and get better. It's that honeymoon period where the euphoria wears off, the irritability comes in, and then gradually they work themselves out of that. I remember taking a group to South Korea, and in South Korea you sit at church, you sit on the ground. Well, you could sit on the ground for a couple of hours because Korean worship services are that long. And I remember several of the students saying, "Why can't they get chairs? Why do they have to sit on the floor? Why can't they get chairs for the Americans?" But then towards the end, they have adapted to it and enjoy sitting on the floor with the Koreans worshiping.
Yeah, that's really
so.
special.
It is possible for us to learn that there are other ways of living and practicing daily life. Yeah.
Yeah, and then what ends up happening, again, the reentry, the reverse culture shock. This is what I experienced in a very real way. Was this exciting 4 months with its ups and downs.
Yeah.
To then come back to the United States and feel like nothing really mattered to a certain
Right.
extent. Like this was, things were just boring.
Were you angry?
What's the point of going to class when it's
Yeah.
not going to be as exciting as being in a classroom with Lithuanians and Latvians and Estonian and Czechs and so forth?
So you came back and were disappointed with
Yes.
the conventional classroom experience at
I think so. At the
university.
time, I didn't realize it was reverse culture shock. I grew up in Spain. I've traveled all over the world. I didn't think that culture shock was something that I would experience.
Yeah.
I experienced it in Lithuania as
Right.
well. I went through the same stages,
Yeah.
And so I warn students, because often they don't believe it's real. They're going to go have this experience and come back.
Yeah.
And so at George Fox, we have a network of students who have traveled abroad. We call them ambassadors, and we encourage them to reach out, have conversations, go get coffees. We buy them coffee because we want them to hear these stories. I want them to hear my story.
Yeah.
So that they're
But
better
during
prepared.
that time, when did you realize I'm experiencing reverse culture shock, and how did you work your way out of it?
It was years later. I
Oh,
didn't
right.
realize it until years later. I dropped
Right.
out of college. I left college because, again, I wasn't going to class. I was not motivated. I failed a couple classes, and things just weren't working.
Yeah.
And so I lived in Atlanta. I worked at a warehouse, and that's what jump started me back into college, because I saw what my future could be, and that's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
And so I came back for my senior year of college and got straight A's.
Yeah.
But had I known at the time that I was going through reverse culture shock, it's funny how calling something, having a title for it can sometimes help you get through it.
Yeah.
I also want to be careful with that, because sometimes, I want to call it what it is. Like, I'm not going to class, right? I'm not
Right.
motivated.
Right.
I'm a little bit depressed. I'm starting to be more reclusive. I very much enjoy being around people, and all of a sudden I found myself wanting to stay in my dorm and watch movies all the time.
Yep.
And that should have been a red flag.
But this gets to the whole point about preparation.
Yeah.
These are the topics, the discussions that we need to have before a student even gets on the plane. They've just gotten accepted to a study abroad program. Maybe they've got their passport, but then they need sessions to help them understand what's ahead, and closure in the country, how to say goodbye, how to finish well, and then re-entry. And a lot of times I think our programs fail to prepare the students about the re-entry process.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm very grateful at George Fox. We have a reentry meeting. We require the students to be
Yeah.
there, and we talk about these things. I think it's also important to know that this is normal, so that when it happens to you, you know that somebody else has gone through this.
Yeah.
That this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Just what I tell my students often, that it's a tough time, but this too is going to pass, and to hang in there, to
Yeah.
look for help, to seek help. But it's also important to know that not everybody goes through reverse culture shock.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
it's also important to know that you're not normal if you don't go through
yeah.
reverse culture
Yeah.
shock, because maybe
Yeah.
you had the best time of
Yeah.
your life and you come back and you're so happy to be back.
Yeah.
And
You
you're
don't want
connecting
to
with
try
your
to
friends.
manufacture it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And what can happen often too is that your friends, going back to reverse culture shock, your friends don't recognize some of the changes that you went through, right? You've had this, depending on your experience, you've had this life-changing, earth-shattering experience abroad, and you often don't know how to express what happened. It's very fresh in your mind.
Yeah.
And also your friends think that you're just bragging all the time.
Right,
You're
right.
talking about that food, that adventure, that
Yeah.
weekend
Yeah.
experience that you had. And
They get
you're not
bored with it.
bragging
Yeah.
necessarily. Maybe you are, I don't know. But of course, it's hard to come across as this is what I went through.
Yeah.
Right. And also understanding that your friends have changed. Your friends have had girlfriends, boyfriends, and they've broken up, and they've learned, they've grown, and you weren't there for that.
Right.
And so now you're having to come back and learn or get to know some of your closest friends.
Yeah, because time doesn't stop
Right.
when we leave for our study abroad. And it's not just friends, it's family as well. And I think we have to be ready to be gentle, but share our story. I think that's an important feature, sharing what happened. But at the same time, be aware that we could become, boring, and we end up irritating them. They don't want to hear anymore. I've already heard it. Stop telling me this story, David. Let me ask you a question, though, because the ambassador program you mentioned, I'm fascinated by that, because I think you're setting the stage, or you're giving a student the opportunity to talk about their experience in a study abroad program.
Yep.
I get that you're using it as a promotional, but that must also be very therapeutic to the student who is giving a stage to talk about their experience.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. We buy the coffee, so we give gift cards, and students will go out, have a coffee, and just share their experiences. Yeah. And when you have two students who have studied abroad in different places in different semesters, it can be very therapeutic. You talk about, and you don't feel like you're bragging. You don't feel like you're imposing.
Right.
The other person's excited to hear about the story, and it reminds me of, that reminds me of the story. This is what happened to me. Or you have these funny cultural, situations, embarrassing possibly, and we found that it's very helpful. I am available to students as well. I went through my own experiences, but it was many, many years ago. I'm older now. And so it's helpful for students to talk to people who are their same age, who studied abroad a year ago or a semester ago.
Yeah.
And I love that program.
One of the things we do, David, at John Brown, and this is for the Irish Studies program. I wish we would do it for the others, but I have more ownership in the Irish Studies program. But every Thursday night in my home, if you've been on the Irish Studies program, you come over for tea.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that's your passport in.
That's
being
great.
on the Irish Studies program. And that has been very, very helpful, because a student who's just come off the Irish Studies program is coming for tea on a Thursday night with their students who have been there maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years before. And the conversation can really, really be helpful in terms of re-entry.
Right.
You're catching up.
Yeah.
But I
so
like the ambassador
do you
program.
do you block the windows and pretend that it's raining, or how do you create the Irish environment?
Well,
in your house?
Here's what we do. We import the tea. We bring the tea back with us. We bring the cookies back with us.
Oh, nice.
And we try to reenact what it's like to live in Lakeside's living room.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That reminds me, it's another piece of advice I give to students when they go abroad, is when they go through that culture shock of missing home. I encourage them to do a weekend in the United States, so I encourage them to stay inside that weekend, to watch a bunch of American movies, to go get whatever food they normally eat in the United States, whether it's go to McDonald's, why not, get McDonald's, even if you never eat McDonald's in the States, like that connection with the United States just for a weekend. And
a little touch of home. Yeah,
a touch of home. And I find that sort of intensive weekend, I did that when I was in Taiwan we did it a couple times. I found that it gives you that much energy and excitement to re-enter that country come Monday. So it's interesting that you have the kind of the reverse. When they come back, we're going to do an evening of, Belfast.
Yeah, every Thursday evening.
That's awesome.
Tea at Stevenson's,
That's great.
Yeah.
What would you say the three takeaways for you are to a student who wants to study abroad? What would you say they are?
Explain that to me more.
So a student comes to you, I want to study abroad, and you've decided on a location, and now you say, okay, I want you to remember these three things before you study abroad.
Three things.
Let's do three. Why not?
Yeah. Why not? Three things. I really want them to understand what they're getting into and what they're sacrificing. I spoke to a young man today who really, really wanted to go on the George Fox Study Abroad program this coming spring, but it's his senior year. And he would be giving up graduating with his friends. And I agreed with him. Maybe the first time best reason I've heard yet for why not to go on a study abroad program, because he's graduating with his friends, and that's very, very meaningful. You can't, go back and do that. So,
right.
So I want them to really fully understand what they're giving up in terms of comforts, the securities, the resources that they have at their home campus. And when they go on a study abroad program, a lot of those are not there anymore.
Right.
All right. So I think that's one thing. Consider the cost. Just consider the cost. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not trying to discourage you, but realistically look at what you're doing.
Okay.
And then I think, as much as a country is welcoming you, you want your posture to be that I am also welcoming you into my life. I want to get to know you. I don't want to offend you. I don't want to assume anything. And so I think that's a beautiful, maybe a posture of humility, meekness, which should come naturally to a child of God. But I think
that's a good reminder for sure.
Yeah, it's a good reminder to go in with a sense of humility. And then the third one, David, is that God is everywhere. God is all over the world working with his people, and his people are everywhere. And look for opportunities to get into a church, to worship. Study abroad should never be an excuse not to go to church.
Right.
We should be looking at opportunities to fellowship with God's people anywhere we go. And beautiful things happen as a result of that.
That's good. I like that. Yeah, I encourage my students as well, whatever experience they've had in the church, I encourage them to seek out an experience in the church in a foreign country, because it's gonna look very different. It can look very different than what you're used to, and so often we get into our own heads, and we may have objections, or we may have had difficult experiences that are very specific to a given church. And when you go abroad, you experience it differently. So I tell my students that as well.
Yeah.
I also tell my students that they should travel. They should go. If you study in the spring, you should plan on staying afterwards.
Absolutely.
And you should go do the program and then postpone your return ticket by a month or 2 months, whatever you can afford. Yeah. And the response I always get is, I don't have any money, or it's expensive. And I hear that, and I agree with you, because when I did it, I also didn't have any money.
Right.
I remember traveling Europe after my study abroad experience, 2 months, and I didn't have hardly any money at all. I don't know how I did it, but somehow I did it. And so I encourage them to do that. But I encourage them to, and you alluded to this, I encourage students to seek people out.
Yes.
Without a doubt, the number one thing you're going to come back with is the experience, the relationships you've forged.
Absolutely.
And you only get to that by opening up yourself, being vulnerable, and allowing people into your life.
Yeah.
And I think that's crucial. I often talk to students about how you're going to have your adventures, you're going to get your picture with the Eiffel Tower, you're going to get all these things, but that's going to be the last thing you talk about. You're going
That's
to
right.
talk about
That's
the
right.
people that you meet.
Yeah.
So I'll encourage students to go to the same cafe every day, for instance.
Yeah.
Like just go every day at 9 a.m.
Yeah.
on your way to class and have a coffee at the exact same place.
Time.
And what you're going to notice after 2 weeks is that the people are going to be familiar. You're going to recognize faces. And then maybe that leads to a quick conversation,
Yeah.
which then leads to a relationship,
Yeah.
which then leads to a deep friendship.
Absolutely. And really, it is all about relationships at the end of the day. It's about relationships.
Absolutely.
And maybe the church relationships become more significant. Maybe it's a friendship family. And maybe when you want to stay that extra 2 weeks at the end, you have a family who say, here's a room. So the relationships are key. And I think they can come back to really a source of encouragement and maybe room and board as well.
Yeah,
as a
possibly.
benefit.
Yeah. So as we consider studying abroad, I wondered if you had any good books that you might recommend for somebody who's either thinking about studying abroad or, in any capacity. What's a good text that I should read?
Well, for me, and I don't know what you'll think about this one, but for me, it's The Art of Travel. It's a book, it's a classic. It's been out several decades by Alain de Botton.
Yes.
That as an experienced traveler, that turned me on to travel. That helped me be a better traveler. I began to slow down and really take a look at people and the culture and their hearts than before I read the book. So I would say that's one book that I could easily recommend someone.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that book. I enjoyed it too. I like some of the specific aspects on it. For instance, he talks about when you go to a museum and you have the desire to walk away with something from the museum. That's why we end up buying something in the store,
Right.
you know? And so to think about what it is that you are taking back with you, it's one of my takeaways from that book too, is just to be conscious of these souvenirs.
Yeah.
I guess is maybe the simple way of putting it, but it can be anything. But what is it that you want to possess physically from your trip? I think
it's so easy for us as travelers to go in and get all the pictures and all the significant landmarks. But he goes into about being present, not being present just physically, but be present emotionally, being present mentally, being present spiritually, looking for God in all of these things. And I think that attitude just enriches the experience for anyone on a study abroad program.
That's great. I'm going to cheat and recommend 2 books.
Okay.
One is a novel by Hemingway called A Movable Feast. And specific to study abroad, maybe not. This is his memoir. When he was in Paris, and he's kind of a penniless author. He's trying to make it work, and it's just got some great stories of him, navigating Paris and having dinner in different places. And he meets Fitzgerald. I want to say, it's been a while since I read it, but I want to say he also meets Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre.
Yeah.
Sorry, however you say it. And I think it can be a good novel to navigate or to prepare for the ups and downs of a study abroad experience, the happiness and the sadness.
Yep.
So that's one I would recommend. And then the other one, I guess I'm going to cheat. I'm going to recommend 2. The other one is...
It doesn't surprise me you're going to cheat. Being a Barcelona fan and all that. You know.
Oh, let's talk about Liverpool.
Never walk alone.
I'll recommend Don DeGraff. He's got a great book called There and Back, and it's a little bit more kind of a textbook, maybe along the lines of the Art of Travel, but it's got great advice on how to prepare for study abroad, how to navigate the experience, but more importantly, going back to what we talked about earlier, he's got a great chapter on re-entry. Like how can you prepare for that re-entry piece?
Yeah.
So those are I guess you get 3 books today.
Yep.
You got The Art of Travel, A Movable Feast, and you got There and Back by Don DeGraff. All right, well, now it's time to drop a pin on the globe. You ready for this?
I'm ready.
The idea is that I'm going to spin the globe. We're going to stop somewhere, and then we're going to talk about the spot. Let's see where we land. Whoa, look at that. Spain. Let's talk about Spain. Have you been to Spain?
I have been to Spain.
What do you think about Spain?
I love Spain. It's a place for most people in Ireland would go for the summer holidays.
Yes.
Would be to Spain.
Yes.
Beautiful weather, amazing food.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where in Spain did you?
Madrid.
Madrid. Okay.
Costa del Sol.
Okay.
And I don't know where Costa del Sol is, but some of my best memories of Spain were in Costa del Sol.
Nice. That's on the beach.
It's on the beach. Yeah.
Well, this is cheating for me because this is where I grew up. So this is
Right.
This was not planned. But yeah, of course I have a special place in my heart for Spain. I would agree with you. Amazing food, amazing weather.
What else would you
beaches.
add since you grew up there? What would you add that I don't know maybe?
I would add that it's not frequently talked about. But a place that people should go to is the northern part of Spain, the northern coast, Galicia, Asturias, Cantabria. When people think of Spain, they think of Barcelona, which has the best soccer team in the world, as we all know. And they talk about the southern part of Spain, Sevilla, Granada. But on the northern coast, you get more rugged terrain. It's very green, mountainous, incredible food. Plus, it's way cheaper.
Up there it is.
Yeah, because it's not as touristy.
But there are things about Spain, the history of Spain, that maybe the majority of us don't know.
Yeah.
The Spanish Armada, the Spanish Navy at one time was rivaled the British Navy.
Yes.
Don Quixote. What a novel.
Greatest novel ever written.
I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Plus their football.
Best soccer team in the world. Barcelona. Yeah, this has been a great conversation. It's been great chatting about study abroad, encouraging students to study abroad in spite of the potential negative experiences that they might have. It's still such a significant experience. And always remember to be adventurous, try things, talk to people, and be safe sometimes.
This video podcast is a production of George Fox Digital. To find more material like this, you can subscribe to George Fox Talks on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Our team really appreciates your feedback in the form of likes, comments, and reviews, and we'd really love to hear what you think. To sign up for our weekly email list and to keep up to date with the latest episodes and publications, you can check us out on the web at georgefox.edu/talks. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.